Hey guys, welcome to today's video. We're going to be going over this week's slate of NFL games and predicting who's going to come out on top in each game. Before we get started though, please drop a quick like and a sub on today's video. It would really help my channel grow. I'd really appreciate that. With that said, let's dive right into the video and I hope you enjoy. Welcome. We're going to be kicking it off here. Houston at Cleveland. I know Houston did win last week. They looked pretty impressive. Beating Jacksonville. Jacksonville looked pretty bad. But I still think Cleveland's going to come out on top of this one. They lost a very tight game to Kansas City Chiefs. They ran the ball pretty effectively, and they played a really solid game. I mean, the Chiefs are arguably the best team in the NFL. Cleveland was able to stay really close to them. They had an early lead. They were out in front early, couldn't maintain that lead. But I think that at the end of the day, Houston's lack of talent. Overall, I know they were able to beat Jacksonville. It doesn't compare to what Cleveland's team has. So I think Cleveland will be able to win, especially at home too. Buffalo at Miami. Miami came out on top against the New England Patriots in what was pretty much a defensive battle. The Buffalo Bills weren't able to keep their lead against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ended up losing that game, but I think they'll be able to bounce back against Miami. Buffalo beat Miami twice last year. And although the game at home was, I think, maybe slightly closer than it was away, Buffalo was still really able to do whatever they wanted to that Miami defense. I think Miami will have a little bit more luck offensively. I think the offense is slightly better. But at the end of the day, Buffalo still is the better team, and I still think that they should be the favorite going into this one. Now we've got Denver at Jacksonville, and especially after Jacksonville coming off a really tough loss last week, and Denver playing a pretty good game against the New York Giants. And I know it is the New York Giants. I like Denver in this one. I think Denver, their ability to run the football, we saw what Melvin Gordon as well as Javonte Williams was able to do. And although Javonte Williams wasn't massive on the ground, Melvin Gordon was pretty big. If this will ever let me load. Now we've got New England at the New York Jets. I think this is going to be a very interesting matchup. Mac Jones coming off a pretty good game last week. I mean, he was 29 for 39 with a touchdown toss. And he looked solid. He looked really solid, looked in command of the offense. At times wasn't terrific, but overall looked really good. Obviously, Zach Wilson looked pretty solid too. 258 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. It's going to be the battle of the rookie quarterbacks. And I think I'm going to take the Patriots in this one. I like their defense a little bit more than the Jets defense. And I think that their, ability to rally around Mac Jones, especially on the offside of the football, which I think was really the issue last week. I think, with their wide receivers, I think they're going to be a little bit better than the Jets. I know Corey Davis had a big week last week, but I think that the Patriots historically also are able to beat the Jets, especially at home. I think that especially the defensive battle is going to lean towards New England. I don't want to spend too much time on this game. I think that Pittsburgh will come out on top. I really like what they were able to do against Buffalo last week, especially defensively. Especially shutting down a really good, offense in Buffalo. Although they did have their share of offensive problems. Las Vegas is both a worse team offensively and a worse team defensively than Buffalo. So at the end of the day, I think that Pittsburgh will get the win. I just think Kansas City is simply going to be able to blow them out of the park. I mean, when you have Mahomes and when you have Kelsey and when you have Tyreek Hill and Clyde Edwards-Helaire on your offense and revamped offensive line, I just like Kansas City in this one. I really don't think it's that difficult. The next game I want to go to is Cincinnati at Chicago. Chicago, they looked okay at times last week against the Rams. But I thought Cincinnati played a pretty good game against Minnesota. Joe Burrow throwing some touchdowns. Jamar Chase looked really good. I think they'll ride that hot streak into Chicago, especially against a defense that struggled against Matthew Stafford last week. And I think that, Cincinnati will come out on top. Between the Rams and the Colts. The Colts last week got pretty blown out against, the Seattle Seahawks, especially via the passing offense. And I think that playing a Rams offense that's really centered around throwing the football, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and you really saw what that dynamic was able to do last week. Also, Van Jefferson had a really long touchdown. There are a lot of options in that Rams passing attack, and what Seattle Seahawks were able to do last week throwing the football really concerns me for that Colts defense. I think that the Rams will have the advantage, and I think the Rams also defensively have the advantage too. They're just a really talented football team, and they're going to be really tough to beat this year. If that wants to load. Beautiful. Dallas Chargers. This is a really good matchup. I think it's going to be a lot of offense, but I think Dallas will have slightly more offense. They were really close to beating that Bucs team last week, like really, really, really close to beating that Bucs team last week. In all reality, they were a minute and a half away from doing so. So I think that they'll just be able to put up more offense than the Chargers. Although I think the Chargers defense, might be slightly better, and they still have a solid passing attack with really solid weapons, and Eckler and Keenan Allen. I think that Dallas's offense is simply going to be too much to handle for that Chargers defense, and I know that Dallas's defense isn't that great either. But I think that they'll be able to be okay because they're going to just put up so many points. With Dak Prescott really leading the way. Titans, Seattle. Tennessee looked pretty bad last week. I mean, they looked pretty bad last week against Arizona. They really struggled. Tannehill could not get going whatsoever. And I think that will be a different story this week against Seattle. I'm going to take, I think, probably what is the underdog in this matchup in Tennessee. I think that Tennessee, offensively, is going to have to bounce back, and they're going to bounce back eventually, right? And I think this is a perfect game to do it against not great defense in Seattle. They're a defense that rallies around each other, but they don't really have that many talented players. Sure, they've got Jamal Adams, and sure, they've got TJ Reed, and they've got Bobby Wagner and some other pieces. But overall, this is not a super talented defense. So I think with the weapons that Tennessee has, guys, like obviously Julio Jones, obviously Derrick Henry, and then of course you've got AJ Brown. Especially against a Seattle run D that's not super good either, and they don't have super great pass rushers. That was really the issue for Tennessee last week. They couldn't stop the pass rush. Chandler Jones had 5 sacks on them. Seattle doesn't really have that, so I think Tennessee will be okay in this one. Now we've got the Giants and Washington football team. I like the Washington football team a lot. I think it's going to be a similar situation for the New York Giants as last week. They played a very good defensive team in the Denver Broncos, and they could not come out on top. That's why I like Washington in this one. I think Washington, although, we don't really know what's going to happen with Ryan Fitzpatrick, I still trust Taylor Heineke if he ends up being the starter. I don't really care who's at quarterback for Washington. I think that their defense is going to be good enough to keep them in games no matter what. And I think that with that said, I think that Washington ends up coming out on top. Okay, San Francisco at Philadelphia. I think this is going to be a very interesting matchup here. Both teams are coming off pretty big wins. San Francisco had a big win against Detroit. Philadelphia had a big win against Atlanta. But now playing each other, low key I'm gonna take Philadelphia in this one. I think that Philadelphia and Jalen Hurts, they're gonna be a sneaky team this year. They're gonna be a sneaky team. I'm a big Jalen Hurts believer. And with San Francisco, I mean, they did give up 33 points to a pretty bad offense in Detroit. And Philadelphia has better receivers too. They have some. They obviously have a solid running back in Miles Sanders. And really, last week the running backs beat San Francisco for the Lions. I mean, that's really what was hurting San Francisco. Miles Sanders is a really solid running back. They've also got really good wide receivers on the outside. That San Francisco, although they were able to shut down the wide receiver last week, they did lose a corner potentially in Jason Verrett. So Philadelphia, I think has a sneaky chance here. New Orleans at Carolina, it's got to be New Orleans in this one for me. They absolutely clobbered the Green Bay Packers, really showing what they were all about. Jameis Winston, 5 touchdown passes. I know he didn't throw for a ton of yards, but it really was a team effort. And I thought that the defense played obviously really well, only holding Green Bay to 3 points. But also the offense too, and it looked like Alvin Kamara got involved. It looked like some other guys were getting involved, and that Jameis Winston was really being able to be effective and productive too. We've got Atlanta at Tampa Bay. This one really is a gimme for me. It's going to be Tampa Bay in this one. You saw what they did to Dallas last week, and Atlanta has a similar defense in that regard of really not a lot of talent, not really good corners. So I think Tampa Bay will be able to throw all over them, and then simply Atlanta doesn't even have the offense that compares to Dallas. So they're not going to be able to put up really any points. Struggled against Philadelphia last week. Tampa Bay is just a tougher matchup, and I don't think that they're going to be able to do much. Then you've got Minnesota and Arizona. Minnesota lost a really close one last week to Cincinnati. Arizona came out real big against Tennessee, and I think Arizona is going to come out once again on top. I think that with their productive passing, as well as Kyler Murray leading the way, it's going to be too much for a Minnesota defense that has been trying to rebuild itself over a few years. I don't love the corners that they have in Minnesota either. I think Patrick Peterson's definitely on the regression side, and some of the other guys they have are just they're too young and inexperienced to go up against guys like DeAndre Hopkins. And an offense that was really powerful and potent last week. And finally, we've got Green Bay and Detroit. And for me, of course, it's going to be Green Bay. Although they did lose last week to the New Orleans Saints pretty badly too. They did lose pretty badly. I think they're going to bounce up. They're going to bounce back against Detroit, especially at home against a Detroit Lions team does not have big expectations going into the season. Green Bay is a team that always rallies around Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers had a tough week here. but I think he'll bounce back. Against a Detroit Lions defense that's not good whatsoever. They gave up 41 points to a that San Francisco team that they played last week. I think Green Bay will be able to bounce back, and reignite their season in week 2. So with that said, if that ever clicks, that's going to end the video anyway. I have Green Bay winning that last matchup, but you can see my picks for this week. Do you agree with them? Why or why not? Leave your comments and thoughts in the comment section down below. Love to hear what you guys have to say. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, see ya.